Hey, welcome back again. So here we are talking about a very interesting topic, and one that I think gets much more attention, maybe not enough attention. Well, it's the attention goes on which one's better, but the attention isn't really that deserved, because at the end of the day, most of what we do, with the exception of maybe a few different pieces of software, they're not really, there's no real difference. Um, My history with working on either the system, I actually started on PC back in the early 1990s, before that was Commodore 64. So it really, when I got my first PC, I started doing C programming. I learned how to operate, ports and all this low-level stuff, assembly, CISC, assembly. But I actually started doing assembly on ARM processors. I was not sure what it was. It might have been a Motorola. It was processor that was running on the Nintendo Game Boy. It was really cool. I actually really enjoyed working with assembly, really simple stuff. And then I started working in C. But this is a Mac, and I also have a Dell PC, and I use them. I use the Mac mostly these days because you can do pretty much anything. And if I need a PC or something, I can just go onto a virtual machine. I don't use a PC hands-on, but it's funny because you kind of do still need this stuff, hands-on. Nothing still beats raw metal for a virtual machine. I would use a virtual machine on a Linux virtual machine that runs on ARM or Intel. I guess it doesn't really matter, right? Because you kind of, it's that part of it these days is really abstracted away. You don't really see any of this stuff. So for me, the reason I work primarily on Mac is because back in 2009, I started working on applications for the iPhone. And the only thing at the time was really Mac that you could build iPhone apps for, Objective-C. And I have to tell you, in that time, the biggest problem that we face is the lack of improvement and the deterioration of the tools that we use. From 2004 to 2024, I can absolutely tell you that the ability to debug applications has deteriorated so much. I mean, I used to be able to run a C program on Windows, and I could just put a breakpoint on a variable. It would run super fast. It would run super easy. Really easy to get into an application. Even on the Nintendo DS, that would do remote debugging via a USB port, or I think it was USB at the time, but it was able to communicate and read the data really quickly. I was able to debug. I had no problems with it. If I could access memory, it was really quick, really easy. I could access the video memory, was displayed really fast. I could look at variables and inspect variables and change them and inspect memory, and it was just like a flash. I don't know whether it's because the languages have changed or something has... Where did we go along the way where I can get this machine, right? This machine here, this is a MacBook M1, right? MacBook M1, older machine. It still runs fine. But if I want to inspect variables on my debugger, oh my God, let me tell you. I mean, first thing is, most variables when debugging Swift or Android applications are a nightmare to even open up and access. They don't show you the value, and if they do, they sometimes show you the wrong value, which doesn't make much sense. Breaking on a value change on Android is phenomenally slow, even on a newer phone. You're never guaranteed to actually break, I found sometimes. And so my gripe is, how did we get to a point where the software that we use has gone backwards? I mean, although we have these fancy layers on top of layers on top of layers, where now if you know anything about iOS app development, you know that you have your view layer, right? Your core graphics layer, and then you have your UI kit layer, and on top of your UI kit layer, you have Swift UI. Yes, Swift UI sits on top of all that. It uses all of the kind of, the manages the windows in a similar way. Android's the same thing. You have Java. Well, you have the low level. You have Java, interpreted language, and then you have Kotlin, which is on top of Java, compiles into Java. So my thing is that we're building all these tools, and it seems like I'm wondering why look, if you look at Microsoft's layoffs and Intel's layoffs and some of the things that are going on in the industry, and I'm saying it again, it's almost like we've reached this ceiling where the technology doesn't really matter. We don't need any of the stuff that is being built by the majority of the main manufacturers, right? So we have these tools, which we have email, we have Teams, we have Slack, we have the operating system, we have a Word program where we write where we write documents, and we have like an art tool. And to me, it's kind of like, well, what comes next? You have obviously these kind of like magic tools, we can call them. They can kind of add and change and edit your video. So a lot of the stuff that we do now is content, because that's kind of like pushing the boundary. You don't really need to. You don't use Word documents to create content, although you can probably plan a script if you wanted to with the Word or Excel. And so we've reached this kind of like peak. For video, I mean, the M1 does everything that I need, more than everything I need for the simple stuff that I do here. And so it's kind of like, well, what happens next? Where is the next phase in technology? Well, I'm working on IoT devices. It's like device integrations, communication, voice commands, ambient computing. And at the end of the day, we have all of these amazing things, and we try to build them to help our lives get better and easier. And it really, again, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether we use a Mac these days or a PC. But my preference, honestly, is for Mac. And I'll tell you why. The operating system for Mac isn't flooding me with advertising. It is focused on the quality of the product. And although we have liquid water, liquid design, right? We have this pattern of liquid design that's being introduced by Apple. And I think, well, what's the difference? A lot of the differences that are coming out with next year's Apple operating system are really under the hood for developers. We can kind of use certain generative tools to update UI. We can use virtual machines to make things, I guess, even more scalable really quickly. And at the end of the day, it's what are we trying to achieve there? Make it easier to build things? Sure. But we don't want to just build things for the sake of building things. We want to build things that matter, that make a difference, and that solve problems, and that help people become better. And this is where I'm concerned about where Mac is going. So although I enjoy working on Mac and the Apple machines, I'm concerned that both Microsoft and Apple Microsoft and Apple really are pushing their products to not help people be better, but to, I guess, supplant certain creative aspects. I think a few people have commented about it, right? Where we kind of like the advertising campaign for Apple Intelligence is like made people look silly. Like the people who were in those ads were made to look silly, and like they didn't know what they were doing, and so they needed this Apple Intelligence. When you compare the advertising, say from the late 90s, and that's here's to the rebels, here's trying to find the genius within us. And so the next phase, I'm really, really aware of what's going on. Something is shifting, and I'm not exactly sure towards where. I'm still in the IoT space, and I'm working on a business to help youth use technology in a healthy way. Because there are a lot of things in the tech industry where they're trying to kind of like, in the same as pharmaceuticals, like they're trying to force feed you this narrative or this marketing. So you use their products and you become kind of one of their customers, and then Meta collects data on you, and then they sell you advertising, etc., etc. My concern is that there's bots that are going to be built to help to communicate with people on these platforms, maybe Mac, maybe Windows, and they're specifically designed to keep you engaged. So I am concerned about that. But for now, I'm going to continue to stay on the Mac platform, build apps, build software, because it does everything that I need. And if I ever want to build anything on PC, I can still jump on it. And there's only one thing that I believe that I would need a PC for, and that is an Unreal Engine. Yep, C++, Unreal Engine. I haven't been able to get it working. on Mac. I guess there's also the Visual Studio toolset at a base level is no longer really supported by Mac. It's only on PC, but I don't really use that. So guys, look, thanks for tuning in. Let me know what platform you use to build software, whether it's Windows, Mac, Linux. Be interested to hear. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.